All right, new video. So as of today, March 9th, 2026, in case you're unaware, the U.S. is currently in a growing conflict with Iran. And a lot of what seems to be driving this is, basically U.S. and Israel are just in the effort of trying to induce regime change in Iran and ultimately, install a better leader that they can work with, so to speak. Now, obviously, I don't want to go too deep into like any of the, political stuff or details around that, but mainly from an investing standpoint, a lot of things just seem to be happening as of late that are worth paying attention to. And there's just, a few simple ones that kind of stick out to me. So first off, clearly, as you probably have seen at the gas pump, prices are going up because oil is going up, right? And oil basically powers the world. And as of right now, at least, the Strait of Hormuz is, essentially closed or partially closed because Iran is threatening to attack any, tankers that come through. And as a result, that would obviously, damage shipments that are going out to various countries around the world, right? And when the Strait of Hormuz is responsible for, 20% of the world's supply of oil, you can see where this becomes a pretty big deal very quickly, right? Because as the cost of oil rises and it affects the cost of everything else, this pain can be felt around the globe fairly quickly. Now, of course, there are all sorts of reserves that can be tapped into, right? Like the U.S. has a reserve. And actually, I think today, the G7 met and discussed tapping into, the strategic oil reserves as well. Don't know if they'll go through with it or not, but as with all reserves, right, you only have so much space to store these things. And so it obviously, right, like that stuff you can't depend on forever. But as a result of all this uncertainty, the cost of oil continues to rise fairly quickly. And of course, you can see it at the pump as well, right? At least in my area right now, I saw one gas station is at $5.09. At least looking at the markets, today, it seems like the price of oil has kind of come down from like that $110 high to like, 90 something right now, right? Just due to the rumors about tapping into the strategic oil reserves and stuff. And so obviously, will prices come back down? Who knows? Because right now, anyway, there's just no sign that this conflict is going to end anytime soon. And as a result, right, from a strategic standpoint, it remains to be seen what happens because in a way, you're kind of racing against the clock here, right? Even with oil coming down from 115 and down to like $90 and some change, right? That's still extremely high and is enough to induce sticker shock on many goods and services, and as a result, right, push inflation upward when we're already dealing with stubborn inflation as it is. So I think these next couple of weeks will be very critical in terms of seeing what winds up happening with oil prices, because they will definitely have an impact very quickly. So it's just something worth keeping an eye on. In terms of my investments and things like that, I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary right now. In fact, I'm using this time to actually just make sure I'm leaning into my foundational strategy, which is making sure that my emergency fund is properly built and where I want it to be. And then, of course, still continue to, split between VTSAX and VXUS, for some international exposure as well. And then I have a little side play in FLKR, some Korean stocks. A little bit of a crossover there with VXUS, but just in different allocations. And of course, it's more concentrated in like an AI bet. So, but aside from that, not really doing anything crazy. Keeping an eye on the emergency fund stuff first and foremost, because, you know, looking at our most recent jobs report, we lost another 92,000 jobs, which is crazy. And there is no telling if there's more weakness in the labor market coming, because that's a very rough report to digest, especially on the back of, you know, that CPI report we had that just showed that, you know, inflation also seems to be trending in the opposite direction we would like it to. And so in a lot of that, you know, I'm just taking some steps just to make sure that the emergency fund is sorted, right? And again, just in the instance that if things were to change, I have cushion room to where I don't have to like resort to tapping into my investments and stuff like that. It's one of those things where, you know, it's kind of boring, right? Because it's obviously always fun to follow the charts and things like that instead of, you know, just putting money away for savings and stuff. But in my view, those are the foundations that will just make sure that you're set up later, right? And you can't build a house on a weak foundation. But yeah, so those are my thoughts for today. We'll keep a close eye on how things develop worldwide, and hopefully there's some kind of conclusion that we reach, you know. But as things are today, there's no telling. So, but yeah, that's all my thoughts for today, and until next time, peace.